78 Denver, take one.
Steve. Marker.
Good morning, everybody. We've got a pretty good crowd here in the studio. And how many we got online there, Ryan?
700 looks like.
700. Okay. That's great.
We're just letting people know we're live, so we're doing some social networking right now.
Great, okay. So this is a coffee clatch, well-known coffee clatch. Often we have these gatherings on Saturdays, because it's a lot of fun to do them on Saturdays, and plus that's generally the day most people can show up. But because this weekend is AES weekend in San Francisco, a lot of us will be there tomorrow, so we're having it today. So thanks for coming out here. So the primary topic for today is Lectrosonics, the manufacturer of the extremely well-known brand of microphone. And as sound mixers, we're kind of a hybrid of artists and engineers, and we rely entirely on the tools that we have to work with. Lectrosonics is by far is among the most highly regarded manufacturers of wireless microphones. We've used them for years. Everybody knows them, and everybody's very thankful that they're around to give us such good tools to work with. So from Lectrosonics, to talk about some new products, some receivers, waterproof transmitter, and also some very interesting new information about available spectrum that evidently is continuing to be encroached upon at our expense. We've got some new information about that. So from Lectrosonics, we have Gordon Moore, Director of Sales for the company. Also have Karl Winkler, who is Director of Business Development. And they've also brought the new West Coast Business Development person, Scott Woolley. So we're glad you guys are here. Nice round of applause for them, please, for making the trip. So I'm going to hand it over to Gordon Moore. Gordon?
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. It's always fun to be here. We get a lot of good input from you guys, so it's really important for us to hear what you have to say. So this will be informal. I'm not going to give you death by PowerPoint. And we'll talk a little bit about some new products that have been coming out slowly but surely. And also we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the spectrum. So we're now introducing, finally getting into production with the new WM transmitter. This is our new immersible transmitter. So when you have a situation where it really is important to throw the talent into the lake, something I know a lot of you want to do on a regular basis, we now have a transmitter that'll survive that without a lot of special treatment. It's got some improvements over the MM400C, which was our previous single battery version transmitter. We learned a few things over the past few years about dealing with immersible situations, and one of them was on the old MM400C, when you put in a battery and you tighten down the battery door, there's a little rubber seal that, of course, seals the battery compartment. On the MM400C, it pushes up against a flat surface. And if you over-torque that thumb screw, you can actually deform the seal, it can pop out, and then you'll have a source for a leak. So on the new WM transmitter, down inside the door, we actually have what is called a seal former. It's a small indentation, and when you tighten it down, you'll see that the seal actually sucks down inside the transmitter, and as you tighten it, it comes up and it starts to swell out, it starts to squish out from the sides and runs into that wall. That then forms a much tighter seal. So now you're actually getting a seal on 3 sides of the O-ring. And an operational suggestion, if you're using one of these, or the MM as well, when you want to dress the seals need to be dressed once in a while. You need to refresh them. Chapstick is a very good thing to use. Don't use a silicone-based lubricant because these are silicone seals and it'll actually degrade the seal. But chapstick, readily available, easy to use, clean. You just wipe a little bit out of that seal and it'll make a big difference in the seal on your unit. Also, we did the same thing where the microphone plugs in. Now, it's completely compatible with the microphones that are already rigged for the MM400. We also make an adapter cable that will let you plug your 5-pin microphones into this unit so that you can use your existing inventory of units that when you're not going to go immersible. You know, maybe it's just an extremely sweaty situation or this becomes your standard body pack. You can get it up against the body, not worry about it leaking through from sweat and so on. I don't have depth ratings yet. We're experimenting with that a little bit. Another improvement to the unit is we've given it this was actually the first of our transmitters to get a backlight so that you can read it in the dark, and it lights up quite well. You can also adjust that backlight, how long it's on, so it can go dark so that way you don't have a glowing spot through the costume that the wardrobe mistress is going to yell at you about. And you can adjust your levels, your frequencies, and so on, just like with the SM transmitter. Unlike the MM400, it also has adjustable power, 50, 100, or 250 milliwatt in the US units. If you are someone viewing this from Europe, sorry, you're limited to 50 milliwatts by your regulations. But if you leave the EU and you're shooting out of country, there's a method for your dealers to raise that level for you, but you do have to take it back down when you re-enter the EU. If you are shooting in the European Union, keep in mind it's a 50 milliwatt maximum and you have to knock the level down. The unit can run on 1 or 2 batteries, so you can actually remove a battery from the unit and have it continue to remain operational. Well, actually, see, we still have an operational system even though I pulled the battery out. And that's nice when you get in that emergency situation. Last shot of the day, your batteries are all dead, and the director unexpectedly says, let's do that one more time. You can go knock the lighting guy over the head and take the battery out of his flashlight and stay up and running. Battery life is basically double what you get with the MM400. You're going to get about 7 to 8 hours on a AA. Alkalines, you're going to get about 10 hours using nickel metal hydride rechargeables. And if you're using the nickel metal hydrides, remember that they have a shelving action. They're going to be great voltage right until they die. They're going to be just wonderful, wonderful. And your battery indicator, if you're using the battery indicator on your receivers, use the timer. Don't use the battery indicator because it'll sit there and say full, 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 dead. So be sure to watch what you're doing with nickel metal hydrides. Lithium batteries, you can get up to 12 hours. So when you've got those long shoots, and another advantage to that when you think about it is if it is a wet production, you're doing Titanic 2, well, you don't want to be changing those batteries every day. You know, it's or every at every break. You know, this will let you go all day and not have to keep diving into the costumes to go pull it out. And one of the other things we discovered after a little bit of time was that we were getting units in with some internal corrosion on the battery compartments, and it was because it was being used in a wet environment like SeaWorld or a wet series, and they were changing batteries with wet hands. So they'd open the unit up, pull the battery out, put the fresh battery in, but the fresh battery would pick up drops of water from the hands. You'd slide it in, and then you'd have a problem. Coming very soon for this will be a dehydrator crystals that'll be built into the bottom of the battery door, so you can actually, if you do get water in there, it'll dry it out internally, and then those can be recharged by sticking them in an oven. So you can heat them up in the evening or set the thing on the dash and let the sun bake it out. So you'll be able to dehydrate it. But the idea, I always recommend anybody using these, teach the A2 and make sure you got a towel on your thing and dry it off before you do a battery change. It does have a fixed antenna, and sometimes people will ask us, well, how long is that going to last? And my response is usually, I'm really not sure, because we haven't had any come in yet for service. But we use a specially drawn galvanized steel wire, and it's made for us. We specified not only the wire and its dimensions and its galvanization, but also the type of insulation going on the outside. So it's a very rugged wire, so when you got that talent fidgeting off stage and doing things to antennas you shouldn't normally do, you're not going to end up with a problem with your system. Actually, the truth is we've only had a couple of these ever need to be replaced. We've had fixed antennas on the UM100 now for 10 years probably. And the LMA, and I don't think we've replaced all but 2. One of them had an interesting story. It had to be replaced because it was an ambush interview, and the bodyguard had cutters. The guy was, they wanted to interview him before he was sent off to prison, and they were, jumped out, and we want to talk to you about, did you really steal all that money? And the bodyguard reached up and went, cut, 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 snipped off all the antennas that he could see, and the funny part is the audio still got captured, so didn't do much good. There is payback. So It's a great little transmitter. It's a machined aluminum housing. The keypad is larger than you'll see on the SM series for a reason. The probability is when you're shooting in the conditions that call for this type of transmitter, it's also going to be quite cold or it will be quite miserable, and you want to be able to set this up using gloves. So the buttons are a little farther apart and you can actually make the changes with your gloves on. It also responds to the RM remote, so you can control the audio through the microphone. Again, if you're sticking this down inside somebody's wetsuit so it's not on camera, do you really want to go wetsuit diving to turn it on and off? And I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but there is an app for that. You can download an app from the website, and it's $20. We don't make it, by the way. The app was developed by someone else called the Electro RM, and there's also another one from Ambient that does sleep, unsleep, and so on, and you just simply set your levels and then tap it, and let me turn up my level a little bit here, and you tap it and you can make the changes to the unit. Some people ask, why did you guys go for an acoustical remote? We went acoustical because you always have to have acoustical access to your microphone. If your microphone can't pick up sound, well, you've got other troubles. Post is going to be a little bit ticked off at you. But you always have to have acoustical access. Infrared is not an effective solution because you're going to bury it down in a costume. It's not going to have infrared access. And we really didn't want to add another radio frequency to your coordination issues, especially building one inside the can for the transmitter. That opens a whole big can of worms. So we went with the acoustical remote control. And the stories we hear from a lot of talent is that they really are very happy with this. So the WM is just hitting production.
The mic bias setting on him.
Oh, that's right. There is a mic bias setting. You can adjust the bias power supply in the WM because this is a 2-conductor input. We only have, tip and sleeve on the microphone input. But some of your microphones will work fine at 1.5 volts. Some need 4 volts. You need variable power. So you can actually adjust the power for the microphone that you're going to use with this. So virtually any audio source is going to work with this. Operational tip, by the way. This came up yesterday when I was over at one of the studios. They were asking, well, this is all well and good. Great, we can now dunk the talent in the transmitter, but when they come out of the water on their B6 or on their microphone, they get a bead of water that clings to the tip of the windscreen. So even though they're now out of the water and even though they're now in the clear for the antenna, the audio still sounds like this because they're talking through a drop of water. So an operational tip, try this. Put a windscreen on the mic, but before you do so, dip that windscreen in Thompson's water seal. It's a silicone-based treatment for leather and wood and so on. Don't get the stain stuff for your wood deck. That can make a mess of the costume. Get the clear silicone treatment, dip it in there, and blot it as dry as you can get it after you've dipped it. Let it soak, then just get it nice and wet. Pull it out, blot it dry with a paper towel, and then secure it over your microphone. And of course, usually when you're dealing with something where someone's going in and out of water, they're going in and out of the water usually at some velocity. Visit your local orthodontist and get those tiny little rubber bands they use for kids' braces and use that to secure the windscreen. When it goes in the water and pops back out, that Thompson water seal is highly hydrophobic and the water will just basically jump off the windscreen and you won't get that muffled sound. It'll clear the element very quickly. Don't dip your element in it, by the way, just the windscreen. I know that Countryman says the B6 is waterproof. I don't know about silicone proof, but it's a nice little operational tip if you were going to do something extremely wet. Any questions about the WM?
I have one. I saw you taking the battery out and the transmitter stayed operational.
Yes.
So you got 2 batteries. You take one out and the other battery operates the transmitter. So that enables hot battery swaps, right? So you can change batteries without turning the unit off.
Yes, you could do it. And because they are independent, that's a great, I never even thought of that.
Operational tip.
That's a great operational tip because you have independent battery doors, yes, you literally could stay operational as you do a battery change. It will survive very nicely. I'm going to pass that around. I've got a couple of them here.
Another question?
I was just curious then, so you said you can stay operational while you change the battery. How long about will that last one you take the battery out, say if you can't find one, super fast, how long will it keep functioning?
Well, you got to keep the second battery in.
Second battery
so you
in
take
at
them
all
out
times.
one at a time. Take out the first battery, change it, then you can switch over and take out the second battery and
Okay.
change it.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, they're basically running in parallel, so you got the same voltage regardless. You know, when we look at our development of products for you guys, we try, and that's why we monitor JW Sound, and kudos to Jeff Wexler, by the way, for JW Sound, because when we are developing a product, we are always asking ourselves, how does it impact you guys in the field? Field work is the toughest. Years ago at the CAS Awards dinner one time, I said, you are our toughest customers. If I was given the choice between doing audio mixing for a live concert, you know, doing the Stones on the Grandfather tour, or doing a film, I'll take the tour every time because that's easier. Recording what you do, your signal to noise ratios are critical, your mixes are critical. It is hard to do. I know, I've tried, and trust me, I'm keeping my day job. What you do also runs into unusual circumstances we don't encounter in other things. For example, one of our design philosophies has long been that all our transmitters run on batteries that are readily available anywhere, because you never know. If we put a proprietary odd battery in your transmitter and that battery goes dead and you have no way to recharge it or whatever you need to do to replace it, and you can't find it down at the local Kmart or the 7-Eleven or the whatever, wherever you happen to be, then you're stuck and you're now in a bad situation. So we always try to design around commonly available batteries. We look very carefully for that. Question?
Yes, one of our online users is wondering if you'll continue making MM400C.
You know, that's a great question, because I was just asking your sales staff here, keep it or lose it. That was the big question, and I think we're going to let the market decide that. The MM400C has the advantage of a smaller size, and I got a lot of feedback yesterday from some of the studio guys that they felt it was important to do that. And by the way, for the online guy that just asked that good question, make sure you email him your address and phone number, and we'll send you some swag. And you asked a good question just a little while ago, so you get the new version 2.0 Tuna Tea. So,
I get a free microphone? I heard that.
Why, yes, as a matter of fact, you get a new handheld here. Yeah, with an interchangeable head. There you go. That's the new mini handheld. So, yeah, we have the new version 2.0 Tuna Tea, except no subs, and on the back side we added more languages, and of course the essential Q symbol. So we have Russian, we've got Greek, we've got the Egyptian hieroglyphics, we've got binary. So we have it all for you here. This is the new version 2.0 Tuna Tea.
So keep those online questions coming.
Oh, and the graphic, the Q graphic on the back, if someone holds their phone up and snaps that, it takes them to the YouTube video that explains what that whole thing is about. That way you don't have to explain it. You can say, if you got a smartphone, just take a picture. So anyway, there you go. All right. Okay, any further questions about the WM? Okay, let's...
Retail price.
Retail price. It's enough. I'll let you ask the dealers about that number. They'll tell you the real number. We have a suggested list, and, you know, it's like the suggested list on a car. It's actually very close to the same price as the SMQV. It's only, I think, about $100 difference, so it's not a big difference. So, okay. Next up, we have the SRB, and what I'm holding up here is an SRA. I'll be honest with you, because I don't have an SRB, but they look exactly alike. So there's actually physically no difference between the two. But we're getting quite a few questions about what is going to be the difference. The primary thing is, when the SRA was originally developed, we were looking at the ENG market. Goes in the slot in the camera, you got a reporter, you got the reporter's victim, interviewee, and you take that little interview at a very close range. And we were limited by the 100 milliwatt current available from the cameras. If you put in a 120 milliwatt drain into one of those cameras, you blow an internal fuse, it requires factory service. So we had to make sure we didn't exceed 100 milliwatts of power consumption on the receiver. In the ensuing 4 years, we have had a number of advances in componentry available, and we've done a lot of research, and so the SRB represents the next generation of the SR series receivers. And the primary difference in performance is in sensitivity and resistance to interference from other sources and other transmitters. It has better intermod protection, and it is a more sensitive radio. So you're going to get better range with SRB, and you're going to get an improved resistance to interference. Some of the things that we did in it, we went from a 4-layer board on the RF board to a 6-layer board, adding some shielding layers. And we moved the IF strip, and it's an improved IF strip. We moved to one IF strip from receiver number 2 to the other side of the board to get increased isolation between the two receivers. And when you look at the boards themselves, you won't see a great deal of difference, but there is a huge amount of R&D in there. We found in many cases moving some components just a few thousandths of an inch made a difference in sensitivity and performance. I've often said that RF development is a lot like voodoo. You know, you have to, some of the mistakes we've made in some of our product development have been because we read the entrails of a Rhode Island Red instead of a standard white barnyard chicken. So it's all in what you take a look at. There's a lot of voodoo involved in the RF side. So we've put a lot of R&D into bringing up this next generation of SR receiver. It takes all the same standard receivers, accessories as the SRs, so it's fully compatible with the battery sleds, external power supplies, wiring harnesses. And it does have one added feature over the SRA. It will take advantage of the talkback function on the new HH Handheld. And I'm going to let Carl talk about the talkback function when he comes up and talks about the HH. Do you have a question online?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. One of them goes back to the WM, why the AA battery won out over 9 volt.
Why did the AA battery win out over 9 volt? Availability. If you are shooting in the US, it's not such a big problem, but if you're shooting overseas, it becomes a huge problem. In some countries, for example, I checked out 9 volt battery prices in Jakarta. It was $15 a pop for what looked like but wasn't a Duracell. And that made me nervous. And the same thing applies in Europe. 9 volts are very hard to find compared to AA's. AA's are available. The other advantage to AA is we've got more options in terms of rechargeable and optional choices. In the 9 volt world, there's only a couple of rechargeable 9 volts that have any kind of real life to them. And we just found in the AA world, there's, you know, it's easy to get rechargeables. And of course, we're trying to head to a greener world here. Rechargeables can really save the amount of waste that you're developing. And boy, there are rechargers for AA's that work off of almost any power source. There's AA rechargers that have solar panels, and you don't find that for the 9 volt world. So that's why. Also, it's a little bit thinner. It lets us get a little bit more compact in size.
Excellent. Also, clarification about front-end tracking.
Good question. A lot of people ask, are we going to get a tracking front end in the SR? The answer is no. We don't have the room for the components necessary to fit into a space that big. Remember, the space, the size on an SR is defined by the camera slot. And the only way we could do a tracking front end was either to give this a giant wart at the top end, which would kind of defeat the whole purpose. The components that are involved in a tracking front end are ceramic resonators. And ceramic resonators their size is frequency dependent. The lower the frequency, the larger the resonator becomes. So we have to allow room for that, and we just don't have the space inside the SR. But what we did do with the SRB is we did improve the intermod resistance of the front end. We made the filters tougher. It's got surface wave acoustic filters inside, and they are surface acoustic wave, I got that backwards, SAW filters. And the SAW filters, basically, we've got a better level now, a much better level of resistance to interference. So while it's not a tracking front end, it definitely is more robust. We ran into an Lectrosonics, we don't mind telling our warts, showing where we had issues. We ran into a situation in England. We'll be talking about Spectrum after Carl talks about the handheld. But in England, they have one TV channel, 8 megs wide for wireless microphones. 8 megs, that's it, channel 38. Now right now, because they recently did a transition, they're also allowing them 39 and 40 until, the end of this year. But they're basically tied down to one block, one very small block of frequencies. Now here, when we came out with the Octopack, you guys adopted it happily because it gave you a great little bag unit to carry 8 channels in, all in one. But you would put in a block 21, a block 22, a 24, a 25. You mixed it up. In England, they could only put in block 606. That was it. And they had trouble getting 8 channels running simultaneously if there was anything else in the region. It was very difficult. And that's what pushed us to start developing the SRB. Now, for those of you that have SRAs, and you're thinking, oh man, I just bought those last year. The difference between an SRB and an SRA is $250 list. For $250, you can send your SRA into the factory and have it converted to an SRB. Now, don't start sending them in right away. You guys online, don't pack them up and ship them today. We've got to get the boards built and so on, but you can schedule it with our service department and arrange to get your units upgraded to the higher performance standard. So we tried to make that as painless as we could. And that basically helps us recover the cost of the boards and the labor to disassemble, reassemble, and put the unit back together. And then you'll have basically a brand new SRB in your SRA housing. So.
MB Sound Online asks, has RF leakage and spray been addressed?
I'm sorry?
RF leakage and spray with the SRB?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the things that were causing some of the problems for the guys in the UK especially. And yes, that's what's been addressed in the SRB. Any other questions? Carl, why don't you step up and tell them about the new HH?
Glenn apparently really likes this handheld, by the way. So for those of you who are not familiar with this is a handheld that's been a long time in coming. We've made the U2 style handheld for many, many years, and it's a popular transmitter. In fact, it's great to see it in a lot of TV and movies. In fact, we got a double billing in the Dark Knight Rises, national anthem being sung by the kid with the UT, and you can see the blue ring. And then it comes to Bane talking, grabbing the transmitter off the referee, and it's an SM transmitter. So we heard about that from everywhere, and actually we had nothing to do with it. People have asked us, how much did that kind of placement cost? And we tell Larry Fisher, it was very reasonable. We took care of it. One of the drawbacks of the old handheld was that it did not have interchangeable capsules. And in the microphone world, particularly in touring and churches and anywhere like that where someone is singing, my capsule preference is very strong with the singers, with the monitor engineers, with the front of house guys. And so it kept the UT out of those kinds of places. So we wanted to look for a different design that would use an interchangeable head. And we looked into it and found out that the type of mount that Shure has been using for many, many years is open season. It's public domain because they borrowed it from someone before them. So we found out that Shure, the big dog in capsule manufacturers, the #1 in touring and all that, we could use that capsule mount. Therefore, any Shure capsule will mount directly onto the new transmitter. This is the HH. And not only that, but there's a lot of other brands out there as well, including Heil Sound, Electro Voice, Telefunken, Earthworks. With an adapter, you can put a Neumann head on it. With an adapter, you can put a Sennheiser head on it. With an adapter, you can put an Audix head on it. So there's tons and tons of different types of capsules available out there in the cases where you need one of those specific capsule elements. And we still make exactly the same element we have been making. We used to call it the VMC? The VMC, right? Cardioid condenser element. And now it's called the HHC. It's exactly the same element, so the sound that you've been used to with the UT VMC is still available. by simply using the head that we supply. And the last sales figures I saw, 60% of the HH transmitters that we've been selling go out with our own head on it. So that was kind of a nice thing to see. So let's talk about the transmitter itself, because if you're familiar with the UT, there's a lot of differences now in the HH. For one thing, it's smaller. It's slimmer. Okay, we wanted to make a very tight, tapered shell. We wanted to make the smallest body we could possibly manage. And one of my favorite stories is we thought we were finished with it. Our mechanical designer came up and said, "Here it is." And we said, "You know what? It's perfect. Just take an inch off and we'll be ready to go." And I just saw the color drain out of his face. But he was able to get very close to that. Another thing is that we put a very nice large control surface on it and an LCD, a backlit LCD. So unlike the old days with the little LEDs on the side that you had to, do that with, and you had to use the tweaker to set your frequencies and the little tiny dial to set your audio level, now all of that's menu driven right here with this large, easy to see membrane switch.
And there is absolutely no truth to the rumor that we went to these LCD backlit displays because Larry Fisher couldn't see the little controls anymore with the tweakers. I'm sure he's watching.
Save your job.
And along with the trend that Gordon was talking about with AA batteries, this uses 2 AA's rather than a 9-volt. And you get considerably more time of run time with 2 AA's. And I don't know if you mentioned that or not,
no,
but
I didn't.
2 AA's actually have more electrical energy in them than a single 9-volt. So that's the other advantage to go into AA's. And like you said about making the case slimmer, we're able to get those in there and still keep a very, very slim case that fits nicely in the hand. To be able to change the batteries quickly, backstage or in the dark or any type of thing like that, there's a lever that you pull and the batteries pop right out. So you set the lever back, you got new batteries in a matter of seconds. So want me to show that? Yeah, so pull up the lever, the batteries literally come right out. Okay, so that was something we wanted to get right with this design as well. We're using a helical antenna of a brand new design that radiates like crazy. This thing, we've been hearing reports from people that this has 2 times the range of the old UT, which was always known to have pretty good range. So new antenna design. And then there's another kind of interesting feature. When it's closed up, there's no controls on the outside, nothing to bump, nothing to fidget with the exception of this little button, which is a tactile button. If you push it, you feel it click. And I'll pass this around so that you can see that. And it's designed to be multifunction. We found that some users may not want to have any controls on it at all. So no matter what, you push the button and nothing happens. So you can bypass the button. Or it can be set up as a mute button, which can be handy in some corporate environments where all you want to do is tell the CEO, okay, it's all set to go. Just push this button right before you talk and you're ready to go. So this can be a mute button that latches and then mute it again if you want to silence it. And it keeps the carrier frequency on so you don't hear any kind of pop or click or anything. It's just absolutely silent. Just turns off the audio and you still see the carrier. Then the third function, which Gordon hinted at a few minutes ago, is the talkback function. So that button can be a momentary talkback. And the way that works is it changes the pilot tone. The receiver recognizes that and routes the audio to an alternate output on the receiver. So all you need with the Venue or the SR is a spare output. And what it'll do, you push the button and it routes it, and it takes about 200 milliseconds. So it's quite quick. It's not instantaneous, but it's fast enough. Let's put it that way. So let it go, and bang, it's back to your output A. So a setup example would be a Venue receiver with 5 microphones on it. You leave one of the slots open to be your talkback slot. The output from that slot will gather all the talkback microphones into that one output. So any of the 5, push talkback, and it routes to that alternate output. And then with the SR, it's when you put it in talkback mode, you have your one output as your main channel, and then the other output as your talkback channel. And when you do that, it actually puts it into ratio diversity mode. So both receivers are engaged in the SR in ratio diversity. So we figure, you only have one main audio output. There's no reason to have the switching diversity engaged for that. So That's the HH transmitter. It does have variable power at 50 or 100 milliwatts. And then for some of the online users that might be in the Europe, it's 50 and 25 milliwatts. So it's variable power. It does all the same compatibility modes as our other transmitters. So if you've got 200 series and so on, it'll do those as well. So it's very, very flexible. And one last kind of nifty feature that one of the guys here mentioned when I saw him this morning, the LEDs for setting the level are actually set upside down, facing you on a little beveled surface. Because that was one of the trouble things with the UT. You're trying to set the level, and you're looking out of your left eye, and you're trying to look at those lights. So now the level setting is actually right there in front of you, and you can set your gain up or down with the arrows while you're watching the LED meters. So one person can set the levels very accurately without doing anything strange. Yes?
Yeah, one of our online users asks, will any other transmitter support talkback?
At this time, no, but we're looking at that for future transmitters. It's a hardware feature, so it has to be designed in with some kind of a button or switch. But yeah, we'll see how the popularity goes for that feature in this transmitter. We might add it to others. Okay, any other questions about the HH transmitter?
Would you be able to do the talkback with two receivers?
What do you mean?
With two different, say you've got two 411 receivers, could one of them be set to receive the talkback from that transmitter?
That's an interesting idea.
Repeat the question because
Yeah. Okay. What he's asking about is, could you use the talkback feature by using two independent receivers, such as two 411As, where one of them is your main receiver, getting your main audio, and then when I push talkback, the other receiver, the main receiver turns off, and the other receiver engages to route the audio to a different place. Yes, I think it could be done. That's a firmware development, and no one's thought about that, but I think that it could be done. I don't see why not.
We don't have it now, but that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll bring that back and discuss it with the guys. Definitely. Good idea.
We're worthy of a shirt and a fake mic.
And that was a good question. Here is a miniature. Did you already get one of these? Hey, this is the miniature 1 gig USB stick HH. See, good questions are encouraged. We like good questions. And by the way, for the online question we got, please have them submit their information so we can send them something. Okay, other questions about the HH transmitter before I turn it back over to Gordon? Yeah, Glenn.
Originally, the handheld transmitter had I think you call it the Vari-mic, where you could change the pattern. Is that still available?
Yeah, the Vari-mic actually, it's an EQ circuit. The HHC, which we figure will be the standard, does not have that feature. But there is an HH VMC, where you can open it up and it's got a low shelf, a mid bell, and then a high shelf filter. So that's what the VMC is. It's the Vari-mic, allowing you to change the EQ curve of the capsule. So if you like this capsule but you feel like it's missing a little top, the VMC might be the way to go and tip your top up a little bit. Yeah, good question. Anything else about the HH?
One of the problems with a hand mic is people like to drop them.
Yes.
Now, with that new type of battery, has it gone through a drop test to see if they come loose?
Yes, it is. And when you close the shell, it captures the batteries. They cannot move.
If you could repeat that question again.
Yeah, okay.
Online people couldn't hear.
Yeah, good point. He asked about the batteries and have we drop tested this transmitter to see if the batteries might come loose? Because with AA batteries, they're kind of held in with two little spring things. But what I was saying is that the shell captures them. They cannot move when the shell is closed. In fact, you try to rattle it, they don't rattle at all. So do we own this? Do we bring this?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
It's not ours.
Okay. I was going to demonstrate it the way I like to demonstrate things, if you know what I'm saying.
If you go to our website, you will occasionally spot a video of us impact testing product. We actually do. It's kind of the joyful moment of product development. Larry's great moment when he gets to drop a new product in the back over on the concrete floor. And the rule is it's got to survive 3 drops to a concrete floor from 4 feet. That's a 6G impact. And we drop it several times and see what breaks. Several years ago, we had Agamemnon Andrianos was doing Nash bridges, and we sent him the original 401 prototype for him to beta test. And on the very first day on the set, he accidentally knocked it off his cart onto the ground and broke it. And he called up really upset about it. We said, no, that's what beta testing is all about. And we discovered that in the impact, the XLR jack that's mounted on the board during the impact had moved about 20 thousandths of an inch and sheared off a capacitor on the board. So we moved that capacitor 30 thousandths of an inch so that it could take that impact without shearing it. We do drop our stuff deliberately.
So we also take it one step further. If you go to the website, you should be able to see a link to the potato cannon tests of the SMV, where we actually shot the transmitter out of the cannon twice into a target, and it still worked. In fact, the audio was still on the entire flight into the target. So take a look at that. It's the SMV impact testing via potato cannon. It's on YouTube.